Great. Okay. I am going to commence the meeting, recognizing that everyone is joining us in the middle of their day. So we want to respect the time that people are able to spend with us today. And I want to welcome everyone. So today, our stakeholder meeting is the fourth of a series of stakeholder meetings in phase two. And the focus today is on neighborhoods and complete communities. We've had a number of conversations and many of them have touched on the neighborhood and complete community elements that we will be discussing in detail today. So I'm happy to see many familiar faces who have raised some of the questions that we will be talking about in more detail today. I'd also like to make a special welcome today. We have students from Ryerson University joining us this morning, listening in. They are working on a course with the City of Toronto that relates specifically to Our Plan Toronto and addressing some of the equity questions that we are raising and trying to tackle through this project. So welcome to the students, and I hope you get some fruitful learning through the conversation today. So I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. The City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The city also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. The city, through this Our Plan Toronto process, is making a concerted effort to work with and engage both Indigenous rights holders in the City of Toronto, such as the ones named here, as well as those who are living and working across the city who are Indigenous, and continuing conversations to support truth and reconciliation and further the Indigenous perspectives in the city's planning. So with that, I'd like to introduce who we have today. My name is Marilise Willemse. I am with Dillon Consulting, and we're helping the city manage and design the consultation program for Our Plan Toronto, and that includes a broad range of outreach. I'm joined today by a number of team members from Dillon who are on our consultation team, helping to manage and monitor and document all of the conversations that we're having and make sure that that is shared and clear with the city as we hear the input today and over the course of our meetings. We're also here with all of the city planning team. So I won't introduce everyone, but we do have staff who are subject matter experts, so specialists in the topic that we're discussing today around neighborhoods and complete communities, as well as those who are involved in the overall management and review of the official plan. So from the official plan team, you'll hear from a few of them, and when they do speak, they'll introduce themselves, just so you know who's talking and who we have on the line. And then, of course, all the stakeholders. So welcome to all of you. As I've said, please let us know who's here. Enter your name into the chat and let us know what organization you're joining us from so we can get to know everyone. A few housekeeping items. We will have a discussion today. You have control of your mic during that discussion, which means please keep your microphone on mute when you are not talking so we can avoid any of the background that we're all getting used to this as we get the virtual meetings. We will, during that discussion, we'll be using the raised hand function. I'll explain how to access that and where to find it so that you can use that to contribute to the discussion. You can also use the chat box. So throughout the meeting, feel free to put in any questions or comments you may have into the chat box. With the staff team members that we have on the line today, they will be answering questions live in the background in that chat so that everyone can see it. So if you have anything in particular, hopefully they can get to that quite quickly. Please be patient. This is virtual consultation. It doesn't always go perfectly, so we will do our best to avoid any technical glitches, but sometimes these come up, so we'll work through it if they do. The discussion points I will point out, but we will also be using polls during the meeting. I'll show you where to find polls and contribute to that. And as you would have received a notice when you joined the meeting, this meeting is being recorded and will be part of our documentation. So, focus today. We are in this series of conversations around setting expectations for our Plan Toronto and hearing from stakeholders on the expectations that they have of the city, of what they'd like the city to achieve for this plan. The focus today is on neighborhoods and complete communities, and we'd like to further the conversation around what people want to see in their complete communities as the city grows and evolves. Our agenda has 4 phases, and those who have been with us in the previous meetings, very similar reflection. We will update everyone on just where we are in the process, reflect on what we've heard so far from participants and through the conversations and meetings we've had. The city will give a presentation to clarify what the OP policies currently do and also what they're looking at, what they're looking forward to in terms of the policy review, in terms of conformity with what's required from the province for the exercise of updating the official plan, but also kind of what they're doing beyond that and what they're considering in this review. And then turn it over to the stakeholders for a group discussion that we will have and listen and hear from the stakeholders about what you would like the city to achieve. Let's get right to it in the update piece and just let everybody know where we are in this process. So the project is in 3 phases. There's 3 phases of technical work that the city is doing to review the official plan and then draft official plan updates to those policies. We are just, the consultation program mirrors those 3 phases, and we're in the kind of middle of part 2. So we launched the consultation project process in the spring of 2021. And that really was a building awareness and developing an initial understanding of the vision of what people want to see and what they want addressed by the city. And now we're diving into the deep conversations on key topics that people raise. So environment, climate change, housing, affordability, equity, sustainability, etc. These meetings that we've had with stakeholders have been designed around those topics that people have brought up. And we're hopefully then the city, through this exercise of really listening, not drafting yet, listening to what people want to see, the city is now, following these conversations, going to be embarking on the exercise of starting to look at the policy directions and drafting those policies. So it's been a series of conversations to just understand what people want to see before the city starts drafting the work. There's many avenues of consultation. The stakeholder meetings that we're having right now, this is just one platform that we're using to reach people and hear the input from a variety of folks. We have a number of other consultation sessions that are happening, kind of specific consultation with Indigenous rights holders and organizations. We have youth outreach and engagement. We have a community leaders circle that some of the folks that are here today are actually part of, and that group is actually meeting in November again to discuss kind of an equity lens on all of the conversations that we are having today. The community leaders circle members work directly with communities that are facing issues of discrimination, marginalization, and inequities across the city. We also are using our website. So we have a lot online, and I hope people can go and visit that and participate there as well, polls, etc. So if you have further questions about any of the consultation program, please feel free to reach out or ask any questions in the chat. I won't go through any more than that today, as we'll focus on the stakeholder input we're seeking to have. As I said, we did do our launch program, and that involved a number of initial meetings and outreach. And in this phase 2, we are on this 4th meeting. So if you weren't part of any of the previous meetings, we have had a meeting on environment and climate change with the stakeholders, on housing, particularly affordable housing and intensification. The future of work and employment meeting was just yesterday, and then today is neighborhoods and complete communities. So all of the information and the input that we're getting from this, we are putting together documentation. We will be sharing slides and presentation materials, as well as a record of the consultation. So please look out for that. It's going to take us a while to compile. It's been quite a series of deep conversations, so we have a lot to put together, but we will be sharing that as it is available, once it is available. So to start us off, I'd actually just like to have people participate in a poll. I'm going to launch that poll now. You can find the poll in the bottom right-hand corner. If you are able to look, there's 3 dots down there, and there'll be a polling option that you can pop up. The poll is now live, and the question we're posing is, have you been to a previous meeting regarding Our Plan Toronto? Either a stakeholder meeting, most recently, I see some familiar people, or in the early phases in the spring when we initially launched and had some conversations. So I'll give folks a few moments to complete that. We've got about half of the participants so far have been able to access that poll. If you can find that in the bottom right corner, you're looking for polling, and that should allow you to pop that open and complete the question. Have you been to a previous meeting regarding Our Plan Toronto? A yes, B no. Okay, so I'm not surprised because I see some familiar people that we're getting a bit more on the yes end today than the previous meetings for all those city folks. For you to know, people have been here. Likely many of the stakeholders have been to one of our stakeholder meetings. When we had the first stakeholder meeting last week, we had more on the no end as having been to a meeting. So I'm just going to close that poll now, and thank you to those who've been able to give us that input. Great. So that gives us some context, but we will have Pauline now give a brief update for those who haven't been to a previous meeting for Our Plan Toronto. Pauline's going to just let you know quickly what you need to know in order to inform the conversation. So over to you, Pauline.
Thanks, and welcome everyone for coming this morning. My name is Pauline Beaupre, and I'm on the official plan team. And just to put it out front too, if there's any questions, as Marilee said, this is kind of, we're in the second phase, so this is kind of a brief overview, but if you do have any questions, you can reach out to us. The email address is opreview@ontario.ca, and that can also be found on the project page if you just Google Toronto Official Plan Review. So also reiterated today, we are going to be focusing on the complete communities and neighborhoods, and as mentioned, we do have the subject matter experts here with us today. Slide, please. So the official plan is Toronto's roadmap for land use in the city. It's the high-level policy document that demonstrates the long-term vision that's intended to reflect the shared values and goals as it relates to the city, and it takes form in policies that help guide decision-making on how we look at land use. It also includes other areas that touch on economic development, the environment, and there's a lot more. And it's important that we keep our official plan up to date with just the regular updates, which usually are around 5 or 10 years, to make sure that we are, planning for that future. And also mentioned, it has to conform to provincial policy. And in this particular update, we are looking at what was released by the province called the Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and our official plan needs to reflect those policies. And what we do know is the city is intended to grow, and it's forecasted to grow by about 700,000 people and 450,000 people jobs in the next 30 years. So we're planning to the time horizon of 2051 and demonstrating to the province that we are planning for this growth and that we can accommodate it. So like I said, this official plan review has a lot to do with the provincial requirements, but we're also including other things. We can see here there's a kind of snapshot of the council adopted work plan, which lays out the areas that we're specifically focusing on. And we can see it's not explicitly here, the complete communities and neighborhoods, but it comes through a lot of these subject areas, and especially that first one, which is the intensification strategy. And we'll look at how we do these things, especially planning around, for example, major transit station areas. This is an illustration of what the current land use in the city is. We have the map on the one hand showing the different land uses, and then we can see it illustrated in a different way if the city was divided into 100 blocks. We have around 20% reflects roads which don't have a land use designation. We see the different greens which reflect parks, natural heritage space. We have a lot of areas designated as a neighborhood as well as apartment neighborhood. And then we do have around 20% which is designated as mixed use areas as well as employment. And this right now under the current policy context is where the intended growth is to occur. So as we're doing our municipal comprehensive review and reviewing the official plan, these are areas where we will be examining, is this what the future, is this still relevant to our planning to 2051? And is this land use designation and these areas for growth able to accommodate that growth that is planned for us? So as we're looking at this and where we are right now, like Marilee said, we're still in the listening phase, and we want to ask these kind of bigger questions. How do we balance growth with the environment? How can this growth help address some of today's issues? How can the growth support age-friendly and inclusive communities? How do we address climate change as we grow? And how do we support communities as we grow to 2051 and planning for this growth that's happening in Toronto? Marilee, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Pauline. So that is a quick snapshot. I'm sure if people have questions you can about the overall work plan and kind of what the direction is, you can put those in the chat, as we said, and the city team in the background can help to answer those. So we've had quite a bit of consultation through a variety of tools I mentioned earlier, and I wanted to just give people a brief update on what we've heard so far and what the city needs to respond to and focus on through the input and the meetings that we've gotten. In phase one, that started in the spring and ran through the summer, we asked people, what do you want Toronto to be in 2051? What are the biggest challenges facing Toronto as we grow? And what do you value most to be sustained or replicated? We got a wide range of input. This word cloud is a cumulative response of the key themes and keywords that came through the conversation. So the larger the word, the more we heard it. Most notably that in 2051, the city to be sustainable, green, affordable, equitable, inclusive, accessible, walkable, resilient. There was also the flip side of this, concerns around overdevelopment, being noisier, being more suburban. So there was a wide range, and we will, as I said, we are sharing the slides. I encourage you to look into what we have heard. Key themes that came forward through the conversation, a number of cross-cutting themes were raised in all of the issues that we discussed, those being equity and inclusion and relationship building, community-led solutions and working with communities to find solutions that work for them, learning from the past and dealing with implementation, and aligning priorities and conversations. That one is really recognizing that there are many conversations happening across the city right now. And so considering that and making sure that there's a cross-pollination, people are talking and know what's being said. The key issues, the key theme areas then that were raised most frequently, this isn't everything, but most frequently, were affordable housing, the scale of intensification, environment and climate change, transit growth, businesses and economy, safety as it relates to public safety and road safety, and also specific safety concerns for women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and public realm, both for design and supply and access to recreational space and green spaces, public realm. So many big challenges were raised through these conversations. I won't go through all of it here, but I do want to highlight for the conversation today that some of the things that were raised are most pertinent to the conversation we will have. In particular, concerns around equity, inclusivity, accessibility, and discrimination. And this relates to process as much as it relates to the planning. Healthy and resilient communities, achieving healthy and supporting healthy and resilient communities, which is part of that complete community lens, and building the complete communities throughout Toronto. So recognizing that there seems to be an imbalance, that there is an experience that the communities really vary across the city, and how to improve on that for everyone. But then diving into the details of those conversations, key themes, I would say, so apologies for the small text, but I think in some ways this is important because it reflects the fact that issues around neighborhoods and complete communities are probably some of those that we heard a lot on. There was a large range of perspectives. And so I want to lay those out here that The concerns related to planning for a range of people and abilities. So recognizing an aging population, the needs of people with disabilities, children, students, newcomers, the wide range that people experience across different neighborhoods. Access to a range of housing options in different neighborhoods. So how different neighborhoods provide a variety of housing stock and types for people to get access to. Discussions around housing as a human right, which is a conversation that is happening very broadly, both at the local level, but beyond just the City of Toronto. More intensification in neighborhoods and dealing with intensification in the neighborhoods where it is primarily single and semi-detached housing, which often have good access to infrastructure, and figuring out what that form could look like as we go forward. Flexibility and permissions for diverse build form across the city and within different neighborhoods. So understanding kind of what the options and the ability what's allowed in different neighborhoods. Creating more walkable and mixed use neighborhoods. Supporting safe neighborhoods for all people, and that relates to one of the key themes that we heard on the previous slide. Providing equal access to amenities, parks, and services across neighborhoods so that there's not a need to travel so far to get to different services and that they're not concentrated in just certain neighborhoods. Aligning servicing and infrastructure with the requirements of growth. So recognizing that as we grow, other things are needed to support that growth. And that's one of the conversations we want to have with people today is what is needed in your community? And are there specific needs in specific geographies that need particular attention? Supporting and celebrating the diversity across communities, because that's one of the things that people really want to see continue. They appreciate that neighborhoods are different and that there's a wide range of cultural diversities in different neighborhoods. Creating active and accessible main streets and retail areas and supporting those. Again, that's an area that many people enjoy already today and would like to see enhanced. And more multimodal and transit supported communities. Particularly in those that aren't serviced with multimodal options today. So it's been a broad range, and I think we're also hearing from those that are in communities and experiencing a sense of concern around too much growth in their community that could threaten the community character that they do experience today, and some concerns there as well. So with that is, I'm going to pass it over now to Greg, and he is going to give you a presentation on what the city is considering in terms of this official plan review and some of the key issues for neighborhoods and achieving complete communities. So Greg, maybe introduce yourself first and then take it away and let me know when you want me to change the slide.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Ewens. I work for the City of Toronto, Chief Planner's Office, and for the last couple of years, I've been working on expanding housing options in neighborhoods with a large number of staff in the City Planning Division and many other divisions across the city. I want to focus on the presentation. So let's go to the first slide here, and because I want to leave as much time as possible for questions. Okay. Here is a 10,000-foot view of the city, not the whole city, but a fairly recognizable part of it. And this picture illustrates the growth patterns, development that have occurred across the city. There has been a lot of growth in development, as of late. It's been focused in specific areas, while other parts of the city have experienced relatively little growth and change over that same period of time. Most of Toronto's growth has happened in areas like the downtown, major transit station intersections, Yonge and Eglinton centers along our main streets. And most of it takes the form of condominium apartments, both in tall buildings and 6 to 10-story buildings, mid-rise buildings, being built on the city's main streets. But a comparatively limited amount of growth has taken place in the city's neighborhoods, the areas we refer to in the official plan as neighborhoods. Now, physically speaking, neighborhoods have changed very little over the last several decades. New houses are about the same size as old houses for the most part, and nobody has been building tall buildings in the city's neighborhoods. And that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. But because they've changed so little, these areas have also, in many cases, seen populations remain stable or decline, in contrast to the significant growth and change experienced in other areas of the city. For many in Toronto, these areas are your communities. They are an important part of Toronto's identity, but they play a critical function in the city. They provide housing. And the city is currently working, looking at new types of housing that we together can build in these areas. Housing that looks a lot like what's already there, but is critical in addressing the city's needs, which with regard to housing are perhaps the greatest they've ever been. Housing for a range of family structures for people at different ages and incomes, different household structures, housing options for people to move into and move within neighborhoods, whether it's for empty nesters who want to build and move to a garden suite in their backyard so they can stay in their community, and perhaps the kids can start a family in the main house and not move far away. For young people, growing families who need more space and wish they could rent a new 2 or 3 bedroom unit in a converted house close to their child's school or daycare and their friends. Or for the person who serves you coffee in the morning or your locally brewed beer in the evening so that they don't need to take transit from an hour or more away just to do their job. It's currently very challenging for people in many situations to find housing in the city, especially in neighborhoods. This is in part because it can be difficult to build the type of housing suited to people's needs. Next slide, please. Okay, the work we are undertaking is simply called Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods. It looks to make it easier to build new housing and retrofit existing housing in a way that fits the scale of what's already existing in neighborhoods while providing much needed new housing options. Now, there's a fairly substantial policy basis for this work. And I won't go through all these details, but the Planning Act, recently amended, authorizes the use of a second residential unit on lots as well as an ancillary unit such as a laneway suite or a garden suite. And that's across residential properties in the province. The growth plan and the provincial policy statement also talk at length about complete communities and the need for a diverse range and mix of housing options, including additional units, to accommodate people at all stages of life and different household situations. Next slide, please. The City of Toronto's official plan, as it's currently written, also contains a lot of helpful policy references which talk about the need for us to expand housing options in neighborhoods. In Chapter 1 in the official plan, the aspirational visioning section of the plan talks about a successful Toronto as being characterized where housing choices are available for all people in their communities at all stages of their lives, where individuals and communities can participate in the decisions affecting them, meetings like this, and where we meet the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Further on in the policy text in the plan, the housing section talks about how a full range of housing in terms of form, tenure, and affordability should be provided across the city and in neighborhoods to meet the city's needs currently and in the future. And that this housing is also critical for our quality of life, economic competitiveness, social cohesion, equity, and the balance of how the city functions really depends on this. Next slide, please. The area that we're talking about with this work, many of you will be familiar with this map. This is the city's land use map. The yellow area shown on this map reflects the neighborhood land use designation. Next slide, please. As you can see, it takes up the majority of land area in the city compared to any other land use. And, as I said earlier, one of its primary functions is the provision of housing. Next slide, please. But you can see from this map, which doesn't entirely overlay with the land use map I showed earlier, it presents an interesting picture of the way population change has occurred in different areas of the city. And you can see that it closely follows the areas where the city has intended growth along our avenues, on our main streets, our centers, the downtown, substantially, areas like North York Center, and so on. And relatively little change has happened over this, rather extensive period from 71 to 2016 in the neighborhoods. We were looking at population and demographic trends as part of this work, and we'll be reporting on that at the Planning and Housing Committee this coming November. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to post a link before I'm done here to information about other stuff we're doing. Next slide, please. Some of you may be familiar with these different forms of housing. It looks like the slide is a little bit skewed. That's okay. We'll send out the presentation afterward, I believe, and everybody can have a look at it. Last year, City Council asked staff to reach out and consult on a variety of ways that we could make it easier to build new low-rise housing in the city's neighborhoods. These different types of housing that you see here exist, in a variety of ways across the city. but they're very challenging where they can be built new. These types of buildings are sometimes referred to as missing middle housing. Now, like I said, a lot of it does exist. About 30% of all Toronto residents live in missing middle housing, but it's largely absent from the type of construction underway today, numbering in and around 1% of planned units per year. So we're currently studying how and where and under what circumstances people might build these types of housing across the city. And we're reviewing our parking requirements, financial requirements, fees, development charges, and other aspects of this work as well. Next slide, please. So these slides are a demonstration of what might be possible. The actual dimensions of buildings that you're going to see are being developed through the various initiatives that we're looking at through expanding housing options. Next slide, please. Now, you can see here, you may be familiar with laneway suites, shown here in orange. We are also looking at garden suites. You may have attended some of the consultations earlier this year on that. There will be further consultation meetings this fall with a final report being targeted for early next year. We're looking at how to introduce multiplex housing in areas both through the conversion of existing homes and through new construction shown in purple. We're looking at opportunities for local commercial uses which support neighborhood life and complete communities. And we're looking at main streets within neighborhoods as opportunities to provide many additional forms of missing middle housing. You can see that on the main street there to the left of the image. Next slide, please. I think it's important to note that whatever happens through this work, it happens gradually. And it's important to note, when you look at this slide, it contains all the housing types that I showed in the last slide, but the scale of housing is very similar to what exists in neighborhoods right now. We're not looking at things that are wildly out of character with what you see in neighborhoods right now. Our work in expanding housing options is about more than just different types of houses. It's a conversation about a number of challenging issues, how supply and type of housing can be provided in different parts of the city, and to respond to Toronto's housing challenges, how we can make sure there are housing options to support a broad range of individuals and household structures, how we can approach issues of access, equity, and inclusion in neighborhoods, what is meant by terms like neighborhood character, and whether those terms are helpful in guiding the future of neighborhood change, and the results and impacts of uneven growth that has occurred across the city, as well as necessary infrastructure capacity to support more housing, and how to accommodate housing in neighborhoods can advance our environmental goals of the city overall. There'll be lots of opportunities for you to take part in this work. Next slide, please. If you haven't already, I encourage you to sign up for e-updates on the expanding housing options work at toronto.ca/EHON. I can drop a link in the chat in just a minute. The consultation approach for this work is focusing on the how. How can we draft policies that respond to some of the key priorities that the city has? And these are identified both through the official plan review and through conversations that we've had through this work already, including ones that were identified in a report we put in front of council in July of 2019 or 2020 that discusses this work program. We want to create a big tent. We want to include diverse voices, including residents, students, newcomers, children, small construction firms, planners, architects, residents associations, academics, and others. And we want to provide a mix of methods to engage. There's going to be more information on this coming out, but I encourage you to sign up for e-updates to keep up to date. Next slide, please. So a couple of key takeaways here. This is the last slide, and I'll stop talking. Policy at several levels to support expanding housing options in neighborhoods. I referenced a few of them in the slide here. They exist at the provincial level of the official plan in many different ways. And the forms of housing we're considering align more or less with the existing permitted scale of buildings in neighborhoods. On major streets, we're looking at whether or not there may be opportunities for things that are a bit larger than what's there. A series of reports will be presented to council throughout the remainder of this term on this work. Again, sign up for notifications so you know when those are coming. And there'll be lots of opportunity for outreach and conversation. It's important to note that this comprises just one part of the city's overall housing and growth strategies. And however this work plays out, I think it's critical to note that change will be gradual. This isn't something that happens overnight. And the majority of the growth in the city over time will primarily still occur on avenues, centers, and in the downtown. But expanding housing options is intended to provide a much needed form of housing in different parts of the city that can accommodate a range of different people. Thank you so much for hosting this today, and I look forward to your questions. And please feel free to reach out and contact me directly if you have any questions or would like to discuss outside of this as well. My contact information is on the email is on the Expanding Housing Options website that you can see there in the chat. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Greg. That was very informative. We are going to spend the next 50 minutes, probably 45 minutes, having a conversation on all of this, questions back and forth. And we're going to do this the same way we did the meeting yesterday. So for those who are there, we're going to keep everybody here. We have about 70 stakeholders on the line, so it's quite a lot. And we're going to try to get through as many questions verbally as we can and have as much discussion as we can, as well as use the chat. So raise hand function. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment related to both how the city achieves complete communities and how they further support the neighborhoods as the city grows and tries to accommodate more people, you raise your hand by, you can either go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little emoji or 3 dots. Click on those and there'll be a raise hand option there that should come up. Or in the panelist list or the participants list, you can hover your cursor over your name and a little hand will appear and you can click that. Alternatively, type your question or your comment straight into the chat box and we can use that. Or we are using a mural board. So for those that are comfortable, you don't all have to get access to it because we'll be using the discussion in the chat, but you can type your comments and info directly into the mural board. So Ying is going to put a link to our mural board in there. And for those that just quickly that haven't used this before, it's a virtual whiteboard. And you click on that link, you can enter as a guest. You don't have to sign in or get a profile set up. And we have a few questions that are guiding questions for you, but feel free to add a sticky on with your input. And the way you navigate this is that you click along the right-hand side of the panel, and you can zoom in on different questions. So our first question, these are guiding, but what do you think would be the best locations for additional housing in the city? The next question is opportunities for what opportunities do you anticipate with expanding permissions for different housing options in neighborhoods? And then what potential issues? So we've got opportunities for expanding options, but what are the issues that you're concerned with in expanding permissions? And I've seen some questions already. I'm going to probably pose the first to the city that I've seen in the chat on the issues side. And then in terms of supporting complete communities, because that's another element of this, it's not just finding more locations and figuring out where housing can go to achieve the increase in growth, but also how do we support the growth? So what land use changes are needed to help achieve and support complete communities? So those are our guiding questions for the discussion. I see a couple hands up already, but I'd like to open the discussion with a first question. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to allow Zara to share her screen. She's going to be taking notes into the mural directly. So you don't need to add your own comments to the mural if you don't want to. We will take the comments that are verbal as well as those from the chat and populate the mural for you. So don't worry about having to use that if you're not comfortable. There is a lot happening. I've been catching up on the chat and on the mural board. We haven't talked as much about the needs of that are required for complete communities, but a lot of input has actually been given in writing, and the city's necessity again, on the complete community to look community by community. The needs are different. And so considering particularly the difference between the inner suburbs and the downtown is quite different, and we're seeing some comments on there. And I think some of this conversation really loops together, even in the commentary we got about being more proactive with community councils and looking at the vision for the main streets across the city. These are things that may actually start tying together through these conversations. So I want to say thank you to everyone. It is 12:30 now, and I want to say thank you for participating. And give Jeff, I know you want to make a couple comments. I'll give you that. I know if you have to pop off, please go ahead. But we'll transfer over to Jeff for a moment to give some comments. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank everyone for participating, spending your lunch hour with us, because the chat has been really helpful for us, and the mural board is really full. And I also want to thank the staff team who've been monitoring the chat and responding to all the questions. So yes, over to you, Marilise.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. So we did get a comment on the number of people that have been attending. I think I just want to reiterate, my screen is black at the moment. I'm not sure if anybody can see that. Is it also dark for everyone else?
Yeah, it's black.
Oh, there we go. So we have a public meeting. So these meetings that we've been having, these 4 meetings, are stakeholder specific. And, you know, relatively speaking, the meeting attendance has been somewhere between 50 and 70 attendees, or 50 and 80 attendees each meeting, which we're getting a ton of great feedback from all of that participation. And then we also have our public meetings. So the public meetings are scheduled next week on Wednesday. There are 2 times scheduled. It's the exact same meeting, just giving people a couple options, one during the day from 1 to 3 and one after work hours at 5 to 7. We encourage you to attend that as well and hear the comments. We want to give as many people an opportunity to contribute to all these conversations as possible. And so we encourage you, if you can, share that too with your community members, with anyone that you know should be part of this conversation, or you'd like to have part of this conversation. And I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for attending.